Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga review. This one's going to be for chapter 62, which is called Run It. So we get Code as the color cover page here, kind of interesting. But the chapter itself, perhaps not as interesting as it maybe could have been. That's not to say that there was nothing in it at all, but the main sort of takeaways once again mainly really only happened in about the last quarter, like the last 10 pages of the chapter, and it really felt like a lot of the stuff that happened before that was all very meandering, or it was just re-going over stuff that we already knew from the previous chapter. In that there's really only like 2-3 little things, and for the most part, like I said, kind of predictable. There was only one way they were really going to go with why Kawaki went off on his own to confront Code, and that's exactly the way that they went with it. It maybe some of the dialogue towards the end opens the door to a little bit more speculation about some things, but definitely one of those ones where I'm like, wow, we waited a month for this. Pacing problems. And I know some people hate it when I mention that, but it's been 7 months since the last arc, the arc that the anime is covering at the moment, and it really has been way slower than it needs to be. And that's been the problem the whole time here in what we've been doing the last 7 months. And that's the thing. 7 chapters, it takes 7 months to do this. Next chapter will mark 2 full volumes. Now, thankfully, the one thing that I suppose this has done is it's created the situation where realistically there's not much way they kind of can't deliver with the next chapter, in that we're all in position here. We have Boruto, Kawaki, and Code, and other characters are on their way to join this. Okay, there's probably going to be some action going into the next couple of chapters. Hopefully this is the last of these chapters where it's mostly set up and repeating the same information over and over again. Yeah, this is one where let's just get straight into kind of going through it page by page, and I think we'll get through it rather quickly. First 2 pages are basically just a recap of the idea that Boruto is the only one who knows that can sense that Kawaki's outside of the village. Otherwise everyone is like, no, his chakra's right here. They can't immediately tell that it's a shadow clone and so on. So we literally get a repeat of the whole like don't you dare interfere Boruto situation. Boruto actually talks out the window to the guy who's monitoring him and tells him, are you monitoring? Like, do you not realize that he's not actually here? And Boruto tells him what he knows, and he's like, no, you're lying. I know you're both in that room. And so he goes downstairs and tells Naruto, which we get in just a second. There's a quick cutaway to Code being directed by Ada to where he actually needs to go, but that's really it. Otherwise, yeah, he comes downstairs, tells Naruto and Hinata that Kawaki's vanished. I don't know why, but he's run off. We got to go after him. That can't be. They go to his room, and Naruto does talk to the guy. He's like, Nishi, you're monitoring his chakra, right? And again, we get a repeat of the same thing. He says, no, both your son and Kawaki are both in the residence. And Boruto's trying to explain that like he's erased his chakra. He's likely gone beyond the village. Naruto believes him like to a certain degree, and he's like, okay, extend the range. I'll notify everyone. But at this point, Kawaki's like, oh, there's no point keeping up the shadow clone. So he pops the shadow clone and is like, yeah, mind your own business. And I suppose this is probably going to help him. He needs everything in the fight that's about to happen here with Code. And so finally, 11 pages into the chapter, we finally have the 2 sort of Code and Kawaki come into contact. And so, it's a decent actually opening sequence of like he puts one of his claw marks on Kawaki, he puts a claw mark on the tree. He just dives into the claw mark on the tree, comes out from behind Kawaki, and it's like, you gain weight, long time no see. And it's like, oh, yeah, as expected, this is not going to be anything resembling an even fight. Code, we just know based on what has been said already, Code should be vastly better than Kawaki. Kawaki really doesn't have a chance in this fight at all. So, Again, Naruto, because Boruto, I suppose, isn't fully able to explain that I can do this because I'm Otsutsukified. He's not really able to explain how he knows what he knows, and so there's a little bit of doubt here. You know, they have pages of him arguing with Naruto's logic basically being, I kind of believe you, but you were complaining about how stressful it was being watched, and that's why I have some doubt about this. They notice the shadow clone is gone, and at this point, obviously, this alerts everyone to the fact that his chakra signature has disappeared. So, yeah, the guy's been tricked, and Naruto realizes it, and so on. We then cut over to Amado and Kawaki, and, you know, they're informed about what happened. He slipped out right from under my nose. Ino does say, you know, he seemed to be acclimating so well. Where could he be heading? It doesn't matter, we need to find him. Because he's one of Code's targets. So what's going on? They don't know the full situation here. There's a little shot of like sort of Amado hearing what's happened, and he just has a ... with the idea that he knows, you know, what we as the audience know, Amado realistically knows. Why has Kawaki done this? He gets it, the others don't quite. So Naruto has to inform them that, like, okay, if it was just normal and he escaped, we could track him, no problem. But his chakra is currently untraceable for some reason, so there's not a lot we can do. Boruto's like, I'll go. I can track him. I'll go after him. But Naruto's like, no, you're also under supervision for the same reasons as Kawaki, so I can't let you go either. And Naruto's just like, the adults will handle it. You stay here. But it's pretty clear Boruto's going to move, go out on the move. So yeah, we just get some, you know, back and forth again. Amado Shikamaru talking. I wonder why he's gone. And Amado with a ... as in I know what's going on. Even though the two of them talked about this, like in the last chapter, and I think the chapter before that as well, you know, what's his motive? I don't know, Shikamaru. Maybe what Amado said to you, like mere, I guess, moments before this, about his devotion to Naruto and how he'd do anything for Naruto. It's just one of those things that's a little unfortunate that, you know, at this stage we are halfway through the chapter and it feels like, get to the show. This all makes sense to a certain degree, but it's all a lot of like, let's organize things so people can't show up at the fight just yet. But anyway, we see that Boruto has left the house, of course. It's a little bit weird about how this happens. I'm guessing they might retroactively explain that, like, Boruto slipped out by, like, making his own chakra, like, invisible or something like that. Or else it was just that everyone else was so focused on trying to find Kawaki that they didn't really keep track of just where Boruto was, so he's able to go. And so Boruto's going with the idea that if they can't detect Kawaki, they can use my chakra to track us both then, because Boruto can track Kawaki. So I guess even if he was maybe masking his own chakra, he's turning that masking off so they can sense him. So that's something. It means that eventually everyone from the Leaf Village can show up at the Code fight when, you know, we know Boruto gets there at the end. So anyway, the fight happens. Kawaki goes to use his sort of body augmentations, but Code is able to block pretty easily. You know, such a violent greeting. Code's very kind of cool and relaxed in all of this. Just kicks Kawaki into the ground. Ada is, of course, communicating with him and is like, don't accidentally kill him, of course. Kawaki goes to use his sort of energy beam thing, but of course it doesn't do anything. And so Code asks the obvious question, you would have been safe in the village, why did you come out by yourself? And he says, I came to see you, Code, I just didn't think you'd show yourself so soon. So they have the conversation. I heard that you want to exact revenge against Otsutsuki Ishiki's killers. That's right, you're well informed. I plan on having at least 4 people die. And Kawaki says, I'm the one who killed Ishiki, the others weren't involved, so kill me and leave Konoha out of it. And this is one of those things where, like, this is in a way kind of like the big point in the chapter. You can also say Boruto arriving at the fight is the big point, but in a way, what they've been building up towards for 7 chapters in terms of Kawaki being basically the focus of the story for the last 7 chapters has been effectively to get to this point. And it's like, okay, I kind of got that already. It doesn't really feel all that kind of unique or anything like that. And especially when they immediately sort of like undercut it here in a second. You know, it all happened because of me. If I hadn't fled Card to begin with, we wouldn't be in this situation. Code just starts laughing and is like, that's what you wanted to talk about? You came all the way out here to make such a ridiculous proposal? To have me overlook your friends in exchange for your own life? He just knees him in the stomach and is like, you've committed a serious crime, graver than anyone else, but that's a separate conversation. I'm killing everyone involved in Ishiki's death, regardless of who or how many there are. So Kawaki still tries to say, like, don't harm Konoha, but he's getting beaten up by Code here. Once again, Ada's like, stop beating him up. You know, you've totally battered Kawaki's pretty face. Code does get very serious for a second and is like, enough. No matter for how short a time, your body was Ishiki's rightful vessel. So don't you dare defile it by groveling on your hands and knees. So he still has such respect for Ishiki that he sort of respects the decision and the sort of significance of Kawaki sort of to Ishiki. That this is the vessel that he wanted, so you can't defile that body by kind of having it beg. So it's an interesting bit dynamic that devotion to Ishiki is still there even though Ishiki's gone. We see demons kind of woken up at this point, but yeah, Code just reveals, you see, Kawaki, I already know. I know what happened exactly, how he died, the whole story, all the details. I've inherited the Otsutsuki will, and as per the late Ishiki's wishes, I'll cultivate a divine tree on this planet and procure its chakra fruit. Now, probably the most significant piece of dialogue in the whole chapter is what he says next. I think you know already, but the divine tree devours all of the chakra existing on a planet. Unless you escape to another dimension, nearly everyone and everything will die. I think that's there for a very, very specific reason. Why would Code, in explaining his plan, also include that, like, well, unless you're in another dimension, it doesn't work, but, like, that's sort of obvious to a degree. So they're sort of presenting the idea of who is Kawaki fundamentally doing this for. He's saying don't harm Konoha, but the person he really truly cares about is Naruto. And what happens in chapter 1? Kawaki has sent Naruto somewhere. He's obviously, the idea would be, sent him to a different dimension to avoid being devoured by the chakra fruit. Now, figuring that in as the answer to basically connecting all the dots, that would have to present the idea that Kawaki is assuming that sort of Code is going to succeed and win, and that he basically has this sort of negative view on things, that to save the people he cares about, he has sent them to a place where they'll avoid the catastrophe of basically the loss state. It does create a bit of a weird situation about, like, that opening chapter, Boruto versus Naruto, and the whole idea of, like, Kawaki does say, like, the age of the shinobi is over, and, like, Boruto is, like, committed to being a ninja. So it feels like there's a few more steps to get there. But that at least is an option. And he says, yeah, you know, exacting revenge against Ishiki's killers is just the first stage of a bigger catastrophe to come. In short, it's just a personal obsession of mine to kill them all, directly with my own hands, before they are devoured by the divine tree. The end result's the same, that of everyone dying. So you see, your puny existence doesn't matter. We're talking about a whole different scale of things. And one more thing, you might find it weird, but you're excluded from my vengeance list. There's someone who wants to meet you, though it really irks me that you seem to always be needed by somebody. You're coming with me, and he's basically about to go and bring Kawaki through his claw mark, I suppose, back to the hideout. As Boruto comes in, flying kick, he sends Code flying a little bit, but immediately Code regains his footing. And the final chapter, page of the chapter here is just Boruto saying, "Yeesh, next time at least tell me where you're going, will ya? Just so I don't get yelled at." And Kawaki's a bit surprised to see Boruto here. But yeah, it looks like we're getting Boruto versus Code. Kawaki seems a bit beaten up, but I get the impression he'll be able to fight if needed. Interesting. I didn't quite expect this. Like I said in my prediction like last week, my thoughts were more that Sasuke would be the one to show up, because I felt like the last chapter was very heavily getting across the idea that Sasuke seemed to know which claw mark he wasn't going to use, so that means he kind of knows what claw mark would be used. So I still think Sasuke will show up, that like he will show up before the sort of reinforcements from the Leaf show up. It's just about, where exactly did they go from here? So it's actually a decent kind of cliffhanger ending, even if it was sort of obvious that maybe this is where they were going to go from very early on in the chapter. But that is the main thing. Like, the main takeaway from this is confirmed Kawaki came out here to meet Code to try and basically take the full blame. That I'll hand myself over to you for your plan, in exchange for you not going after the other people you want vengeance for. Code obviously immediately throws that up in the air by saying, I already know the full details about that, so don't lie to me and say that you did more than you actually did. But just know that, one, I don't plan to kill you anyway, because someone actually wants to kind of speak to you. Ada, of course, for her own goals. And then also the fact that to Code, it almost doesn't matter the idea of if he spares people now versus then, because the whole plan is about the divine trait, and that's something he still wants to do. So, people are going to die anyway. Why does this matter? Now, I suppose the idea is going to be when Kawaki fully gets a chance to talk about this, and really discuss this, what is his, response going to be? Does this change his approach? And like he says, the only way that you don't avoid, the divine trait is by being in a different dimension. Now, I suppose they say that with the idea that I guess you can't just like be on the moon or something like that when this is happening. So a different dimension ultimately makes sense in terms of theoretically how are people not going to be on the planet. It has to realistically by being in a different dimension. So yeah, that makes sense. And I think they put that in here for a very clear reason, as like, Kawaki will remember that, and so on. So yeah, the big thing here, how's this fight gonna go? Code versus Boruto. Obviously the idea is that Code is way more powerful than both Boruto and Kawaki. They've been a bit weird about if they actually did much training during the last 7 chapters or not. It felt like that was sort of just a dropped plot point from the previous volume. So Boruto shouldn't really have any extra moves or anything like that. So the only real thing I can think of them bringing into this fight is the pills. Is there going to be a side effect that comes into play here that will affect Boruto in this fight? And then if Boruto is pushed to his limit or beyond his limit, where he has to use up a lot of chakra, that means Momoshiki is going to come out. And is that going to be the big thing here that we're playing with? How does that affect Boruto's like Otsutsukification level? If Momoshiki comes out again, how does that work with the pills that are kind of repressing it? Or does that burst through it and it makes it even worse, and Boruto's very soon going to be complete, and then Momoshiki can be reborn? It's a weird one in terms of how it all plays out. Like, obviously we know Boruto still has the karma mark that he can activate by the time we get to the chapter 1 flash forward incident. So it sort of locks what you can and can't do to a certain degree. But still, Momoshiki could be used, because that's what feels like the only thing that they can actually do to have this work. Now, what they seem to be doing here is creating a situation where there is going to be a pretty big battle at play here in this forest, that Code is going to have to fight to bring Kawaki back to base if he wants. And so what's Sasuke going to do? If Naruto shows up, what's going to happen? There's a lot of moving parts. The other one is like Amado. Amado has the limiter for Code, and that's something that he wants to get at. He wants to have that full power. Will that be sort of the takeaway from this? That if all the most powerful shinobi arrive out here to fight, Code, if he finds a break in the battle, can just move to his claw mark back at the village, go into the village and find Amado and get the code somehow. We'll see if that happens, because they've set that up for a reason, that the code's limiter probably will be removed at some stage. But yeah, I suppose the only other thing is just that is this our first? I guess this is the first time our hero characters are properly learning that Code's plan is more than just vengeance. That he also wants to complete the divine tree thing. That even though he's not an Otsutsuki now, they don't actually know what we as the audience know, that if he eats the chakra fruit, he'll become an Otsutsuki, according to Ishiki anyway. So, it's one of those situations where I think this chapter is interesting because it adds a few little bits and pieces to speculation. But for the most part, in terms of what I'm discussing here, it's everything from like the last 10 pages. Stuff that happens from more or less like before then isn't that interesting. It's like, the last 10, 12, 13 pages maybe is probably the most interesting stuff. Especially the first 10, there's not a lot going on, I think. And then I think the middle section of the chapter is very hurt by the fact that Amado is in this weird spot as a character right now, to where everyone knows there's more to him than meets the eye, but for some reason they're just completely unwilling to just like say something with him, like to write him to actually be more than just mysterious, I know more about what's going on than you know more about what's going on, and stuff like that. And I'm wondering, have they maybe missed their opportunity to really commit to that? Probably not, but I want to see them do something with Amado sooner rather than later. Definitely. But other than that, yeah, it was fine. It was one of those chapters where it was like, okay, next week surely will have to be a really good chapter, just because it's all set up, it's all there. Boruto, Code, Kawaki, and the potential for other characters to interfere. Great. The next group of chapters should be good because we're back into a fight and things actually happening. But please, 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 hopefully this is the last of these chapters where it feels like half of the chapter is just, we gotta fill this chapter out to get to the next chapter. So there's that. The other point would be also, the next chapter is going to be a volume ending chapter, so there's an expectation that, something relatively big might happen. But who knows? I said that about the last volume ender, and it was probably one of the weakest kind of cliffhanger into openers for next chapter thing we've ever had, with the tease of Amado, and then he doesn't really say anything. So, it is what it is. I can't bring myself to be overly critical on this one. It's just, the usual pacing isn't great, but they're getting there, I guess. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter, everything that happened. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.